On today's episode of eCommentary, we are so lucky to have Adison Clark, co-founder of P&Co, the men's and women's fashion label, who also works as a brand strategist for a number of other brands in the industry. So we are getting the best of both worlds. And I'm really, really looking forward to picking your brains, Adison. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no worries. It's good to be here. It's good to get chatting and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, hopefully something amazing. But I think the best place to start is to hear all about your journey into your current role as a brand advisor, brand strategist, and of course, that wonderful P&Co journey that you went on.
Yeah, God, flashback to 2013, I think. So I guess the start of P&Co, I'll just start by saying that we knew nothing. So that the brand has been purely kind of created off the back of three guys, and off of, our kind of joint, I guess, mission and purpose, just to create a global fashion brand that spoke to, well, we were the kind of customer profile, so that spoke to us. At the time, kind of 2013, social media was just kind of happening. So we kind of jumped on there, to be honest, personally straight away, just to kind of see what was going on there. And then I guess we saw an opportunity just to really build community and connect with people that shared similar values. And because at that time we were really into, fashion and products, it just kind of all happened very naturally. But none of us came from a branding background or an e-commerce background or a marketing background or an operations or finance. So all of that journey over the past kind of 8 years, we've kind of lent on different people for different reasons and had to kind of learn and just try a lot of things just to get, P&Co to where it is today. So fast forwards, from knowing nothing to now, a six-figure plus business, 14 people in the direct team. And obviously we use different agencies and currently sell, globally around the world. And I was obviously involved in the founding team. And then I guess being involved in the brand and kind of building it from, and the idea to where it is now, I was kind of, happily within my role. And I kind of, at that point, the business was doing really well. And I kind of took the opportunity then to kind of take a step back and just evaluate everything that I'd done, or the experiences that I'd gained. And at that time, I guess I identified myself with more as the founder role rather than the CEO type, very structured, focused on financials, focused on team, on culture. I was very scrappy. I was the founder. I tried 6 different ideas at once just to get us to where we needed to be. And that's kind of, that's the person that I guess I will always be. So I kind of took the opportunity to kind of say, well, how can I take this kind of founder within me and help other businesses, kind of achieve what we did. So now, as you say, I am out of the day-to-day at P&Co completely, and I'm now working with other kind of D2C fashion brands in kind of helping them get to where they need to be. And with my background within the marketing and digital world, that's kind of where my strengths have lie, and that's how I'm helping founders and growing other businesses now.
See, I think that there's a little bit more to this, because there must be something in the water in the West Midlands, because I've listened to a couple of other business owners that have done really, really well in D2C from the West Midlands, and they say the same thing. We didn't know anything when we started. And I'm thinking, is there a secret education over there, or is there something that's in the water that's kind of giving you this entrepreneurial spirit? Or is there something in the community that's teaching you the value of that? Is there some lessons from childhood, like Gymshark? I'm going to drop them in it. They place a huge emphasis on community. You've done exactly the same with P&Co. Like, do you think there's something culturally that's happening, or is it just coincidence?
I don't know. I mean, from my experiences, I think my dad had a big part to play in this, because as I grew up in my childhood, my dad would be like into everything. He'd be like into snowboarding, into mountain biking, into motorbiking, into golf. So he kind of had a lot of different interests, but he'd always be around the same kind of community group. and they try different things together. And I guess that's what, created when we were building P&Co. The lifestyle of P&Co had lots of different interests within it. And I think it's good not to kind of pigeonhole yourselves too much, because you never know kind of what's going to happen within different communities and how different interests are going to evolve.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's staying open-minded to different inputs and not putting yourself into a box. I just think it's so fascinating that like how brands develop. And what were some of the key breakthrough moments with P&Co along the way, and like the things that got the cogs whirring? You said you didn't know anything in the beginning. Like, what were some things where you're like, oh my God, this works?
Good question. I think the first kind of, I'd say 12 months, it was just about kind of product development. So, we do a lot of designs, we print them. I mean, I could go on forever about the kind of first year, to be honest. But I think, if you're looking for a breakthrough moment, I guess it would be when we started to see kind of spikes every time we launched a very considered and consistent collection narrative. So an example would be, there was one collection that we called Desires and Liars, and we created this whole story around, what inspired the collection, where we're getting the products made, what inspired the designs, and we just completely told that story on all of our kind of social platforms and via our website and via our email. And when we started to really market, I guess, through all of these different channels, that's kind of when we thought, wow, we're connecting with our type of people out there now. So we just kind of rolled with that and made sure that every time we launched something new, or there was a key moment that we needed to tell a story around, that all of our ducks were in a row, so that we're communicating a consistent message everywhere. So on every touch point that you would interact with the brand, you'd know exactly what was going on and you'd know the story. So I guess that one of the breakthrough moments was just realizing how important consistency plays when you are building a brand and telling a story.
And at the time, did you recognize that as brand building, or was it just, this is something?
Probably not. No. So I think flashback to probably 4 or 5 years into the brand, the team was growing. I needed some help kind of just building out the digital marketing team, and we actually kind of connected with a digital marketing consultant at the time. And I think we sat down in a room one day and we were just kind of, I think one of the guys in the team was like, kind of asked, we don't really know what marketing is, what is marketing? She literally said, everything you are doing at the moment is marketing. Like you don't realize how well you've marketed the brand so far. And then once we kind of, I guess that was a bit of my education there, just kind of working with that consultant and kind of going over, what's the different strategy through the funnel? How do you connect with people? And that we were already doing, but I guess that we needed to kind of standardize that as we grew, as we brought on agencies, as we brought on staff members, just to kind of, I guess, tell those different strategies in a more direct way, I guess, rather than on the back of a piece of paper in our office.
But I think this is always really funny to see with brands, and we've come across it a lot as well, is that like some brands intuitively just pick up on like best practices from marketing science, so that sometimes we have conversations with them and we're like, you're really focusing on a brand-led campaign here, so that's the stories that you're telling and the type of creative that you're putting out. And the brands are like, oh no, we just put this creative out because we ran something and it worked, and then we thought we'd try to do another one. And you're like, yeah, it's like, it's textbook. You just, sometimes brands don't understand the category, like what it is, like, and what marketing science would label it as. It's just something they've tried, figured out, and it's worked. And I think that's one of the really, really interesting things. And there was a super cool study by the IPA and the Financial Times, and it was that 83% of business owners rated their knowledge of brand building as poor. And they understood,
because there's so many different conceptions of it, I guess. Perception.
Yeah, that's it. And it was that they didn't have the knowledge. They understood the importance of it, but they didn't put the time into actually learning the theoretical like application of brand building. And what they saw was that if a board understood the power of brand and like how to build one, then companies had a better chance of success. And now I'm thinking, as somebody who's built a brand, with you going into businesses now, that's like, that's like bringing, some serious gunpowder to a battle with that knowledge. So I think what I would love to find out a bit more is like, how were you leveraging brand in P&Co, and how did that evolve? And then how are you applying that to the new brands that you're consulting for?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, isn't it? I think there was a quote that I read that was kind of like, if you understand brand, you get to play the game of capitalism on easy mode. Because it is, brand is the difference from selling, this bottle here versus this bottle because it's got the logo on. It's just really, really interesting. It just adds that value without having to do a lot in terms of the product, but just because you are perceiving that product was made by this company, you're automatically going to go for that because you perceive it in a set way. And I think the way that we kind of leveraged the power of a brand, I guess, to start with, was just that we were lucky enough to be marketing to ourselves. So we would, and we would kind of think, okay, what would we gravitate to? How could we be seen to be, different? So I guess we had that as a benefit. But I do think as soon as we kind of started to get in that consistent, tone of voice and imagery and video, that played a massive part into it, just the visuals of how the brand looked. And then you layer everything else on top of that. So what the vision was, what the mission is, what the purpose is, and then our values. You don't see any of these things, but you feel them when we, through our marketing or through our behind the scenes, we made sure that in the office that they were very prominent. So the team kind of knew and got behind them, because I think, and this is the interesting kind of conversation that I have with clients now, is once we've kind of created this brand strategy, so you've got this document that's got, all of these different kind of sections, once that's kind of pushed out to company wide, loads of different people within the business, if it's a designer, if it's a customer service representative, or if it's someone managing the packaging inventory, they pick up on different keywords in this brand strategy document, and that helps them align themselves to the brand and the mission. So I just think it's having that strategy day one is so important. And it doesn't have to be 100%. You can change it through the years, but as long as you've got the North Star document to align to, it really does help with that consistency and make it stand out from other brands. So I think it's just super important just to have that, have that document and have that session from day one.
And what you stand for. We've got a client at the moment. I'm not going to drop a name on it, but one of the situations with that brand is that they believe in their brand and they have such strong views on their brand that they will actually turn off top performing performance marketing campaigns when they think that the frequency is too high. So that our team have had a number of conversations, and for performance marketers, it can be quite difficult to turn off an ad that has super profitable ROAS, but their stance is that brand comes first, that they've got to treat their audience to something 100%. New and a new visual. And once you start to see how consistent they are with that principle and how much it works, that you can then introduce another piece of creative that's equally as good. Because it comes down to the photo shoots, it becomes easier to switch out those high performing, high ROAS.
Yeah, because you've got confidence there.
Yeah. And it's not a piece of creative that's winning, it's the brand that's winning. And that's the important part. And that's the part where smaller brands struggle. They're so reliant on an image, a piece of copy, but actually building brand gives you way more security in the long run. And,
definitely.
And it plays into everything, like multi-channel approach to marketing. So I think one of the things that we find is when you preach brand to a business, it takes a little bit of wrapping your head around, like, how are you approaching that with the clients that you're working with now? And how are you preaching consistency of brand to them?
Well, yeah, it's everything that I'm kind of preaching to them on a daily basis, to be honest. But I think that I think why people, value a brand is really subjective. You might value this brand for the different reasons, and you might value, and I might not value this brand. So I think that first and foremost is the brand you're going to create should not be for everyone. It should be, very targeted and very purposeful. And I think that the difference between, brands should be, almost polar opposites, because that's how you're going to grow and own a certain kind of demographic or a certain psychographic. So I think that's kind of how I, sell it into people, is the more defined you can be and the more you can speak directly to your customer, the more profitable and the easier it's going to be to show up for those customers. So I think that, brand strategy, obviously park marketing, as long as you've got that, and as long as you are confident with it and willing to give it a try, that helps the marketing team, do their job. Basically, if the marketing team are kind of saying, well, what are our values? Would we support this charity or this charity? If they've got those answers, they can make, decisions a lot faster and kind of progress and try different things quicker than they would if they didn't have any of this kind of brand. I know some people call it fluffy stuff, but without the kind of fluffy stuff and the kind of big mission statements of why people need you, and the brand would be why they want you, I think that without that, the marketing team can't really do their job as effectively as they should do.
Yeah, 100%. And it allows you to be a lot more reactive and aligned. And I think there's a really good case. It was Vegemite during the Ashes, and Marmite started to give away samples of Marmite, and Vegemite's reaction was that we don't sort of need to go down that whole like love it or hate it approach. We are Vegemite, and Vegemite tastes like Australia. And then they took out I think it was in the Daily Mirror. They paid $26,000 for this campaign in the Mirror, and it went back and forth between Marmite and Vegemite. And there was part of the campaign was the Vegemite colors to Lords. If you support Vegemite, and of course the natural colors of the people who wear the pin of the suits at Lords, the blazers, is the Vegemite colors. So they were super in tune with like how their brand should sound, how they should operate, and they were able to be so reactive. And I think they said that it generated a couple of $1 million worth of free PR from this $26,000 investment. But it just shows that by being so in tune with your brand, it allows you to take advantage of every opportunity. It allows you to have an opinion. If you know how your brand talks and you know what it believes in, you can do that. And I think that some brands struggle because, should we be supporting this? Should we be vocal about this? And it's because they haven't defined who they are. And I think that's super, super crucial.
Definitely. And why they're doing it as well, I think that can get misread sometimes. I think, if you look at Nike, why they do what they do is to expand human potential. But to distill that one kind of why or purpose statement down, that's probably taken, them maybe months or even years just to get to that. But it's so easy to get behind and figure out how you'd use that in a campaign. It's just so useful. So I think that 100%, there's so much opportunity in, just defining the brand, strategy, as I say, vision, mission, purpose, values.
100%. And I think that it's everything. It's how you operate. It's how you execute your campaigns. And it's also like how you justify, like what we have to always remember is that there has to be a reason for a customer to choose your product over other products in the category. And your brand is the reason for that choice. And that's what a lot of people, they need to really kind of nail before they can elevate and spend all this money on, performance media or paid media. They need to know who we are, what we stand for, and what our customers want.
Yeah.
And
I mean, go on.
Sorry, go on.
We didn't spend a penny on marketing for the first 4 years. So we didn't spend anything on performance marketing until we knew that we got something to say and that our brand strategy was absolutely solid. Just because being a startup brand, we didn't want to waste any budget or spend any money in areas that we weren't too certain were going to work. You know, Facebook came along and said, we've got this massive ad platform. You can put a message in front of millions of people, but by the click of the button. But we kind of thought, well, okay, well, that's a massive opportunity, but it also could be a big, detriment if we were to put, a message out that just didn't hit our target market. So we made sure that whatever we were going to do when we went on to paid was super refined and super kind of targeted. And it was going to, turn heads. It was going to get people interested. It wasn't just going to be another ad that you scrolled past. So we took our time and built the brand out and built the community that we were comfortable with, and then we scaled.
Yeah, and I think that's the safest way. There's, if you jump into ads too quickly, it's an expensive way of learning. When you can utilize platforms and organic traffic, if you can't get content that gets views, that gets engagement on TikTok, on Instagram, it probably shouldn't be going into an advertising campaign. Test organic, and then once you kind of got a feel for what people like, what drives sales organically, then accelerate it with paid media. Now,
definitely,
we're going to go into a really, really interesting time of the year from now, Q3 and into Q4. And I'm sure that, you're doing a lot of work with your brands at the moment in terms of preparing them for Q4, which means doing the work in Q3. I'd love to hear what you're working on, what tips you can share, and like how you are preparing brands for Q3 for Q4 success.
Yeah, at the moment, with the kind of uncertainty around how performance channels do perform, and unless you've got experts kind of working on them day to day, but I guess I've been preaching kind of two things really. So knowing your audience and being authentic about the messages that you are communicating. So I think in Q3 and Q4, that's really how you're going to cut through the noise and make a meaningful connection as a brand. So first and foremost, it's understanding that audience and literally profiling them down to what TV shows they watch, what they're going to be doing on a Saturday night in October, really going into detail into how that customer behaves through Q3 and Q4. And then making sure that when you are showing up in front of that customer with your product or with a story or with a campaign, that it's completely authentic. So it feels right for you to be there. So, example might be showing up at a Christmas market because you sell, a certain type of drink or a food that kind of would go within this ecosystem. So I think, audience and authenticity are just the way to win through Q3 and Q4. And even at the moment, just with, how things are going in terms of the economy, that I think that if you can refine those two things down, you're only going to appear with the people that are going to resonate with you. And then also, I think it's also weighing up needs and wants in this time as well. So making sure that, if you are a need product, that you're very strategic in what messages you communicate and why people would need you. So if you're a hiking brand or, performance stock company, that you make people know that you are a needed product. And then if you're a want product, like an emotional purchase, such as a leather jacket, communicating those USPs around, it's made for the journey, it's a long-term investment, you're only going to buy it once, less is more. So just thinking about what marketing messages you can be putting out when people are kind of thinking about your products with those two mindsets, I think is really interesting. I think that's going to play out, through the rest of the year, the next 12 months, depending on how things go with the economy.
Yeah, and it's a bit like that study, again, with Super Bowl commercials. And what they found was that to maximize how successful your Super Bowl commercial should be, the brand should actually be kind of releasing stuff before the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl shouldn't be the first time that somebody encounters your brand. It should be done before that, and you'll get much more like effectiveness from your advertising campaigns by doing that.
I agree.
And that's what Q3 is an amazing opportunity to do. I know that there's a lot of brands on, summer markdown is starting now, and there's also a lot of people in stock clearance activation mode because shipments have been late. They're stuck with, especially in fashion, summer stock that came in too late, and now they're thinking, oh God, we've got to get rid of this. But what we've noticed from our internal data is that conversion advertising costs, CPMs, are up. They're super expensive, but brand awareness CPMs at the moment are ridiculously low. The amount of impressions that you can get at the moment on Meta, on TikTok, is insane. So that using that as an opportunity, understanding the playing field now, building those conversations with people, and then maximizing it in Q4 when everybody else is going to be paying a premium for cold traffic conversion. If you've already built the platform, like you said, convert them in Q4.
And it's, if you are going to be doing these brand awareness campaigns, it's, I think brands and marketing managers have got to be prepared to take some risks. They've got to be prepared to get in front of people for the reason of not making any sales, but for connecting with their target consumer. So, I think one of the brands that I was kind of working with the start of the year, so, we wanted to do a campaign with a charity, and, I kind of said, let's not put any sales KPIs around this. It's purely for awareness. And to be honest, it's a massive brand value of ours that we would link in with this charity. And off the back of that, we had a massive awareness push. And people, when they were shopping for their product, would think, I remember that brand who did that campaign with this charity. I'm going to go and buy from them. So it's about, looking and seeing things with a long-term kind of hat on, and just being in front of people that make sense at the moment for a softer touch rather than a sale, for them to then think, I need this present for someone. I remember that brand. I'm going to go direct to them. Because I do think that social media and those type of ads play a part in marketing a brand or a product, but it's really important that you kind of have, a lot of marketing strategy going on in multiple channels that aren't online, that are offline, or, even in print magazines. So there's so much opportunity there right now, as you said, just to kind of start those campaigns that you might have to kind of, I guess, kiss a few frogs with, but it's going to come back around eventually in Q4.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like almost a strategy straight out of our playbook, and we've been doing this for years. Before any big promotional period, like at least 6 weeks before, we're trying to create a brand awareness play, be it a famous influencer, a model, a celebrity, trying to get those into a brand awareness campaign where we push it out. We get eyeballs on site, and you've got to take a hit on ROAS. If you're looking at ROAS, you've got to take that hit, but the money is made 6 to 8 weeks later when you go on promotion and you have this abundant source to retarget, to work with, that have seen your brand, who recognize your brand. And it's such a good 1-2 approach.
I agree. And I think as well that brands that I'm working with at the moment, I'm really trying to get them to take a good look at their experience. So, they're acquiring lots of customers at the moment, but and I know this is a bit cliche, but, what does the packaging look like? What does that order confirmation note say? What does the box say? What's the, that whole experience is going to determine if that customer comes back and shops with you or not. And I think there's a massive opportunity there for brands to, obviously, a customer is going to be buying this product, but if you can give them extra value in the form of, I don't know if it's a booklet or a sticker or who knows, there's loads of things you can put into orders. But I think if brands can start to think about how they can do that differently, I think that's going to be a really strong play, just to invest in that whole packaging piece and that experiential piece, because, that's got 100% open rate. Email, yes, you can send out emails and try and make a connection, but when you've got that physical product in their hands for the first time, that's so important. And we at P that's one of the things that we spent a lot of time on, just making sure our packaging and, you know, the thank you cards were just completely optimized and, you know, the best experience we could possibly give.
Yeah, and I think, like, understandably, people are really, they're tracking margin, and, you know, nice packaging costs money, but so does a second acquisition cost.
So does losing the customer.
Yeah, yeah, it costs even more money. You know, it costs you way money to either acquire a new customer to replace them, or even, you know, to run a paid media campaign to get that customer back in. Whereas if you've created a really nice impression, the chances are that they're going to refer you to a number of other people. You know, a nice handwritten note, it goes a long way, because it makes people feel more than just, you know, a bank account.
Yeah, it makes them, you know, it brings them into the community, I think. I mean, look at Mr. Porter and End Clothing, big, massive retailers in the UK. They still do handwritten notes on every single one of their orders. That probably costs them, you know, that would be a big kind of sum to bring in that extra result, but it works for them and they're investing in that and they continue to do so. So it just goes to show how important that whole experience piece is, and offline marketing can be as effective as online.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of want to dive a bit more into this. Like, how do you work with a brand to build that community element? You know, how do you, like, it goes from that, you've got them to buy a nice brand experience, but like, how do you progress that? You know, how do you make someone feel like they're a part of your community?
Yeah, and it shouldn't be looked at as a difficult thing. It should be a natural thing in my opinion. So with P&Co, that community happened very naturally. And I think it goes back to what I was kind of saying before around this whole authenticity piece. So, you know, we were a startup brand. We didn't know what we were doing. We were 3 people to start with, and we communicated those messages honestly to people. We didn't act that we were a massive company. With the social posts that we were kind of putting out there, we made sure that people knew that. And that built the community, because I guess they wanted to get behind what we were doing and almost support it. So that was a strategy, I guess, that was working for P&Co kind of when we first started. And then because we've taken these customers on that journey, and because all of that legacy content is on YouTube, on our blog, on our Instagram, when people do go back and get more into the brand, there's this whole story that kind of folds out. So I think that, you know, community needs to come from, you know, the brand, you know, the founder, the team, that whole piece, that kind of beat behind the scenes, I guess, is so valuable. I think people need to look into that a bit more. But then you've got the flip side, whereas, you know, so I was working with a brand last year, and they were a pajama company. And I think we spent maybe a month just going over their brand strategy document and just pulling things out and just really simplifying it. I think we landed on an organizing thought that was just, you know, they were called Chelsea Piers. So Chelsea Piers made for modern lounging. And that organizing thought, so made for modern lounging, really enabled us to get into the community and kind of, you know, be involved with how that community would lounge. So how they would relax, where they would relax, what they would be doing, drinking. And we create, I guess, a community moments around all of those different touch points. But it's different for every brand, and that's why it's not one size fits all. You've got to try different things out for different products and different businesses. And obviously every brand will be in different kind of stages. So startup, scale up, and then, you know, growth, I guess. So there's different strategies and different tactics that you can implement at different times for different reasons.
Yeah. And I think just from that kind of brand strap line that you mentioned, like, the ideas flow. So already you can start to see like how the visuals would look, like
exactly
what goes on in the community, what would be pieces of content that the community would, you know, would appeal to the community. And I think it's understanding like what it is that you're doing, like what is the purpose, like where do you fit into this big wide world?
And don't force anything. I think, you know, if you're going to go after, I don't know, maybe a cycling, you know, customer demographic, don't come up with a campaign that's just not natural. You know, it needs to fit, it needs to work. And I guess that's how Made for Modern Lounging for Chelsea Piers worked really well, because, you know, we could we could pull out all of these different customer profiles and kind of think, well, our product is made so you can have a better time doing relaxation and, being at home and winding down. So how can we fit in that authentically? So, it goes to what you were saying. It really does help pull from ideas and campaigns and make sure that everything that you're doing obviously leads back into the brand strategy and that wider plan.
Yeah, and I think as we're starting to go into a period where marketing budgets are maybe tightening up a little bit,
Definitely.
This approach is more important than ever. And like, what advice would you give to brands that are going to go through potentially a tougher period in the next 6 months? Like, what sort of dangers can they expect, and what sort of strategies can they move towards to ensure that they come out of it successfully?
Don't do drugs. No, honestly, replace the word drugs with Facebook or Pinterest in a bad sense. Don't go after these opioid moments of spikes that just happen, and then you don't know what happened, and then it completely kind of falls off. Make sure that you're using these channels for this purpose, not this, because that's just not sustainable. So I think at the moment when budgets are tight, just go and invest in what works. So turn old audiences back on that have historically worked for long periods of time, and be very kind of risk averse in trends that do happen. So TikTok at the moment, everyone's shouting about TikTok, but unless you've got the audience that are on that platform that are willing to buy your product at the right time, going on there with a massive budget is just going to kind of get completely wasted. So, I think it's just be careful where you are investing in and make sure you're, putting budget into things that have historically worked.
Yeah. And like, avoid chasing. This is, I think this is one of the biggest pitfalls. Everyone's made projections for the year, and what we're seeing is that brands are trying to chase against those projections that were made a long time ago in a completely different set of circumstances, and then the way that they're able to achieve those objectives is with hard flash sales. We're seeing, like, my feeds are full. YouTube is full of flash sales, spot deals, and this is
And what do you notice though in that feed? I was looking at this before we jumped on the call, just my promotions inbox in my email, and it was 30% off, flash sale, free shipping. But there was one cycling brand that I follow is, how to ride longer and faster, something, and I was like, oh, what's that? A bit different, but I know what they're doing. They're trying to stand out amongst all of this chaos and give me some value that isn't, I'm not having to buy their product or, invest, in that sense. But it was something that resonated with me because I'm obviously their kind of demographic, and I will then go back to them and kind of look at what they are selling when I'm in need of some new cycling clothes. So it's thinking about things differently, and when everyone's doing one thing, maybe kind of thinking, okay, how can we just tip the scales and be a bit different?
And again, community is at the heart of it. It's, yeah, I think my inbox is the same. It's either, it's 50% off this thing, 40% off this thing, 30% off, 20% for signing up, and then it goes through this cycle, and it's quite dangerous because it's a race to the bottom that small to mid-sized companies are going to lose.
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a sale for the right reasons, but I think if you are trying to build a community, being honest with them as to why you are doing a sale and kind of putting a positive spin on that. So 50% off end of season sale to make way for our autumn collection is a much positive message rather than 50% off buy. So I think you can reframe these things, have a positive message, and also to get people thinking about what's coming next and what they're releasing down the line. So I do think they're needed, especially now, but it's just thinking about them a bit differently and kind of making sure that they're not as hard focused on those sales.
Yeah, we took an approach with one of the brands we're working with, and our whole guidance was around using the product at the moment. So the email was like how to protect your horse. It was a horse brand.
Okay.
We talked about this one before
Yeah.
the call. And we were talking about like how to protect your horse in the summer. And that was
Nice.
the email. And the email is talking about the product. The product is at the heart of, protecting your horse, saving on vet bills. And then in the middle of the email, we have product image with a discount. Discount wasn't the focus, but it certainly closed, a lot of the traffic after we led with value. So it's like, here's the value, here's how to protect your horse, here's the discount that's on offer. And the conversion on that was insane. It's when brands are going with that, that it's all about the number before the percentage sign. There's no real value added. You've got to try to lead with a bit of value or a bit of style advice or a bit of something.
I think it's that copywriter model, isn't it, that people use? It's attention, interest, desire, action, AIDA. So you get that attention first, spark a bit of interest, create the desire, and then follow up with the action, which is kind of how that email was put together from what you were saying. So I think 100%, thinking about things differently and just tweaking the order of how you communicate things can have a massive impact.
Yeah, and it's about playing with your marketing. Marketing should be fun. There's so many tools in a marketer's toolbox that it's so important to have fun with them and trial out these things, like going right the way back to your conversation about understanding your brand. Like once you understand your brand, you have so much more freedom to operate because you understand what your brand would do in a certain situation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even with the women's football team just winning the Euros, so a lot of brands got involved in that moment, like Kit Kat, Weetabix, etc. And they were only able to do that because they knew how they would react to it, which was because they've got a brand strategy. I thought that was really interesting.
Do you think I looked at some of these campaigns, right? And do you think that they were created for this event, or do you think that they were recycled?
Or the men's.
Yeah.
I had the same thought. Yeah.
I was thinking, like, amazing that they pushed them out. And I think that like Nike did some sick campaigns with the women's football team. And it was so cool to see like Mason Mount getting behind it and really supporting it. But some of it I was thinking, if we'd won the penalty shootout, would we have seen those campaigns way earlier?
I'd say so.
I mean, they were put out quickly, so good job for being savvy and on the ball, literally.
Yeah, I think I can't think of any off the top of my head, other than maybe a photo of a woman kind of saying "hold my beer" when it was a screenshot of that penalty shootout, which is, I think if they can tie in the authenticity of the women's team winning it, I think that those brands would have stood out against all those other messaging. I think the Royal Mail one with just the ball and coming home, did you see that? I was like, has that been recycled? but it was all good. It's all positive.
Yeah, so. Good on the women for bringing it home. And
amazing.
Maybe they've paved the way for the men, and they'll some creatives will have some more thinking because all the good stuff was used, so they'll need to come up with something else. Definitely. I think there was just one more thing that I wanted to cover on today's episode, and it's something I posted about on LinkedIn, and it was brands that are being forced into price increases and how they tackle that in the next couple of months. Like, any advice that you would have, any ideas and like ways to communicate that?
Yeah, I've had this with a few clients recently, actually, and some have just taken the route where we're just going to have to absorb this because we want to stay competitive, and we think that's the right thing to do at this time. We can take a cut on profit to maintain our brand value and our integrity, and then hopefully over the next 24 months they can find different suppliers and move things around. Whereas other clients, they have had to increase those prices, and I took the view as long as you're upfront about it and you communicate those messages honestly to your database, I don't think there's any issues with that. But it is going to be a tougher time for people that are doing that to stay competitive. But as long as you can follow it up with being, authentic and consistent with the marketing that you are doing, and I think I would probably buy something that maybe was a bit higher priced if a brand was, resonating with me more because they'd sponsored a certain event or teamed up with a certain influencer. So, as long as you're being clever with your marketing and you can resonate with your target customer, I don't think it should matter as much. So it'd be quite interesting to see how this kind of moves forward.
Yeah, and again, I've seen a lot of SaaS companies have been increasing their prices, and when a SaaS company does it, and I don't have any loyalty to the SaaS company, a part of me is always thinking, do I actually need that tool? Do I need this? And one of them, I'm
Netflix.
Netflix did it. Like I'm one of them. I cancelled my Netflix subscription.
Yeah, I was shocked.
But one of the brands, it was a company we've used for years. They announced a new integration. So they announced the Klaviyo integration as a data, and then the big print was we've developed our Klaviyo plugin. It's available. Amazing. Opened the email, was so excited. It was like, yes, love this. And then underneath it was like, yeah, if you want to use the Klaviyo plugin, you now need to go on to a plan
enterprise package
and it was like 500 a month. And I was like, do you know what? A manual export of the data isn't a bad thing for this each week.
Or a Zapier input.
But it's just how you communicate those price increases and being honest. Like if you do need to do it to keep the lights on,
and it depends what size you are. I think for the bigger companies, they need to take a more strategic approach to how they communicate this. But for the smaller brands, and we used to do this when we first started, don't make any noise about it. I know this is good to say, but we had to increase and decrease prices from time to time, and sometimes it's better just to not say anything at all, depending on the size and how you're kind of playing out in the vendor. So there's lots of different tactics that can be done around that. It's just having the guts to just go with one and be certain on it.
Yeah, and as a good guide, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I read was that if your price increase is temporary during a recession, don't do it.
Exactly.
So it's only if it's going to have a serious long-term impact that you should go with the price increase. If it's a short-term thing, eat the cost. But if it's going to impact the brand long-term, then you need to do it.
Yeah, and change. There's always that change in the product or changing certain things about the product that could save costs as well. There's a lot of clever production people out there that I've worked with in the past that can do magical things with numbers and finishes and trims.
Yeah, and Adison, just kind of circling on that theme of LinkedIn, you deliver some wicked content on LinkedIn. If people are looking for you, where can they find you and follow along with some of the advice and follow along with your inputs? Yeah,
so probably the best place to go is my website, and all of the social links are kind of through the footer and the menu. So it's just adisonclark.com, ADISONCLARK, no e.com. And my Instagram's on there, my blog, and obviously all the social links. And then I am working on some tools for the marketing teams at the moment via Notion. So just some kind of dashboards and things that can get people organised for Q3 and Q4 that will be releasing pretty soonish, I hope.
Wow, I'm going to need a sneak peek on those as well. That'd be cool to see what you've got going on.
No worries.
Adison, it's been awesome to have you on the show. Really, really enjoyed some of the advice and wisdom. And I think that any brand listening to this is going to have got some really, really cool inputs from you. So really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll hope to have you back on.
Likewise. It's been good to chat again. I think we had a conversation off air that we were kind of like, we should have recorded this, but I'm glad we recorded this one. It's definitely been fun.
Yeah, once we got it going, it took us a few stabs, right, with the different softwares, but good old Zoom to the rescue. And thank you so much. And
no problem.
We'll speak later on.
That's good. Cheers, guys. Thanks.